If we've learned anything during this pandemic, it's that sports has the power to bring us together, just like it did in the past. From natural disasters to world wars, from civil unrest to cold wars, one thing we can always count on is sports. As we look around our stadiums and arenas today, we are reminded of the challenges we face and also how much we have overcome. We've been down this road before. The desire to get back to work and compete is as American as a no-touch high five. So let's come together, adjust our masks, and remember the times when we were united by sports. There are moments that define every generation. Nearly 20 years ago, after the largest attack on American soil, it was our united response that brought us all together. On September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks on the United States would change our way of life forever.
The second tower got hit, and I was like, passenger jets don't do that by accident. They do it on purpose. So I was telling my wife, I'm like, I think New York's under attack.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
There was no precedent for such a tragedy on American soil, so Major League Baseball suspended all games indefinitely, while our nation grieved and tried to make sense out of what had happened.
I knew right then and there that tonight's baseball game is not important at all. Yeah, we're in first place, and yeah, we're fighting for a postseason, but the importance of baseball diminished right then and there.
6 days later, a familiar face appeared with words of encouragement.
The President of the United States has said it is time to go back to work. And so, despite a heavy heart, baseball gets up out of the dirt, brushes itself off, and will follow his command, hoping in some small way to inspire the nation to do the same.
And then, another baseball legend confirmed that it was time to play.
I don't know about you, but as for me, the question has already been answered. Should we be here? Yes.
I remember they played the anthem, and then we were all holding hands. And there's this huge flag, and you saw a bunch of grown men just crying right there on the field. It was one of the most emotional things. It was one of the most unifying times of this country's history. At that time, we all came together.
Some changes were made to the uniforms.
Each player playing in the major leagues has had an American flag sewn onto the back of their uniform. The hats will also wear American flags.
There was magic in the air.
It is goosebumps at the Metrodome as baseball begins again.
And on the field. And when Mike Piazza stepped up to the plate during the first game back in New York, there were fireworks.
Lopez wants it away.
And it's hit deep to left center. Andrew Jones on the run. This one has a chance. Home run! Mike Piazza, and the Mets lead 3-2.
I remember once we got to the World Series, we go to New York. There was some trepidation about playing that night, and the possibilities of another terrorist attack or something happening there that night. But when the President of the United States came out and gave a thumbs up and just zipped a strike in there,
the President of the United States.
The place went nuts. All of us just kind of looked at each other and like, that was pretty freaking cool. And I don't think I've ever seen a country more unified than it was right then and there. Whatever your politics are, I don't care. At that time, we were Americans. It wasn't left and right. It wasn't anything other than we were Americans, and we're going to get through this, and we're going to get through it stronger.
In times of uncertainty, we are united by sports. The best modern comparison we have to the COVID-19 pandemic is the flu pandemic of 1918, also known as the Spanish flu. Infecting roughly a third of the world's population, or about 500 million people, experts estimate the number of deaths to have been between 50 and 100 million worldwide, including 675,000 in America. Due to many athletes falling ill and others fighting in World War I, the 1918 baseball season was almost abandoned. If it had been, one of the greatest hitters of all time might never have been. Faced with a player shortage, the Boston Red Sox allowed one of their pitchers to take batting practice. After belting 5 home runs, Babe Ruth was inserted in the everyday lineup. But early in the season, Ruth contracted the flu and nearly died after the team doctor swabbed too much silver nitrate into his throat. Fortunately, the Babe made a full recovery and still managed to lead the league in home runs while guiding the Red Sox past the Cubs to win the 1918 World Series. In hockey, the 1919 Stanley Cup Final between the Seattle Metropolitans and Montreal Canadiens was proving to be one of the most exciting in history. But after contracting the flu, Montreal defenseman Joe Hall collapsed on the ice during Game 5. That evening, several more Canadiens fell ill, leaving the team without enough players to finish the series. Montreal decided to forfeit the final, but Seattle refused. And in a show of unity, both teams were honored with a place on Lord Stanley's Cup. While a precedent had been set for continuing to play sports during World War I, Major League Baseball would ask for advice from the highest office in the land more than 20 years later. The 1941 Major League Baseball season has been called the greatest of all time. Between Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak and Ted Williams batting .406, there was plenty for fans to cheer about. But after the season was over, the unthinkable happened.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
When Japanese bombers launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt declared war on Japan, and life in the United States would change dramatically as we entered World War II. Not long after the attack, Major League Baseball Commissioner Kennesaw Landis wrote to President Roosevelt, asking his opinion on whether or not the upcoming baseball season should proceed. The president responded immediately with what is now known as the Green Light Letter, indicating his belief that it would be best for the country to keep baseball going. More than 500 major leaguers would serve in the war, including Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, Stan Musial, and Detroit Tigers slugger Hank Greenberg. Although he'd already served and been discharged from the military, Greenberg re-enlisted out of duty to country, but acknowledged that this would likely be the end of his baseball career. In 1943, with the country at war and many men fighting abroad, Chicago Cubs owner P.K. Wrigley led the charge to establish the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League.
Baseball brings out the All-American Girl Baseball League for spring training at Alexandria, Virginia. 2 teams are working out, the Fort Wayne Daisies and the Racine Bells, getting in shape for an opening day doubleheader.
Founded as a way to maintain baseball's popularity during World War II, teams were primarily located in medium-sized war production cities in the Midwest. During a time when women were increasingly making an impact on the workforce at home, this sisterhood of baseball players was doing its part by bringing a new brand of baseball to areas yearning for some wartime distraction. Meanwhile, as the war was nearing its end, Hank Greenberg was finally discharged from the Army after missing more than 4 baseball seasons. Unsure if he could return to his pre-war baseball form when he won 2 MVP awards and hit 58 home runs in one season, Hammerin' Hank decided to give it a shot. In his very first game back, Hank brought the fans to their feet as he launched a home run into the bleachers. It was a moment to cheer at the ballpark. but represented a celebration after all the sacrifices our country made during World War II. In times of uncertainty, we are united by sports. While many people get their breaking news from social media, there was a time when live television captured a natural disaster during one of the biggest sporting events of the year. The 1989 World Series featured the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland Athletics. Dubbed the Battle of the Bay, Oakland jumped out to a 2-game lead before the series moved to San Francisco.
I'm Al Michaels. Welcome to Game 3. It's been dominant Oakland pitching, of course, in the first 2 games.
But just minutes before the start of Game 3, a 6.9 magnitude earthquake rocked Candlestick Park.
I'll tell you what, we're having an earthquake.
Power was knocked out and pieces of concrete fell from the upper deck, causing confusion for everyone at the ballpark. The players' families spilled onto the field, and police arrived to help evacuate the 50,000 spectators.
Gentlemen, power has been interrupted. The game has been called. Can you please leave the stadium in an orderly manner?
Not many people inside the stadium realized it, but the earthquake wreaked havoc throughout the Bay Area as fires erupted and pieces of the Bay Bridge and the 880 freeway collapsed. It was rush hour at the time of the quake, which normally would have meant massive numbers of casualties.
And some people are saying that the World Series may have saved us several hundred lives, that the traffic at this time was lighter, there was much more spacing, there are fewer vehicles up there than we would have expected to have been up there.
After Oakland A's pitcher Dave Stewart made it home that night, he drove to the Cypress Freeway to bring food, drinks, and blankets to the first responders working through the evening.
It was a 6-hour drive to get back to the other side. Well, I then came up with an idea that maybe I could, get necessities, food and drink, to the people that were there and that were working so hard to get people out. And that ended up being my mission.
Finally, after a 10-day delay, the World Series resumed in San Francisco.
So here we go. Several days later, Game 3 of the World Series is underway with a strike.
Stewart would win Game 3 and the MVP award, as the A's would go on to sweep the Giants in what will forever be remembered as the Earthquake Series. This past season, several NBA teams protested by opting not to play in a game. But in 1992, after racial injustice sparked riots in Los Angeles, one team insisted on playing to help heal the community. The year was 1992, and the trial of 4 white police officers accused in the beating of a black man, Rodney King, was wrapping up. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Clippers, led by Danny Manning, Ron Harper, and Doc Rivers, were locked in a playoff battle with the Utah Jazz. Down 2-1, Doc and the Clippers were preparing for Game 4 when the verdict was announced.
We all assumed that the verdict would be guilty. I don't think anyone, at least me being a black American, I don't think anyone thought it would come back not guilty.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant not guilty of the crime of assault by force likely to produce great bodily injury.
That was one crazy day. I remember we had a practice in the sports arena. We're sitting there, and then all of a sudden these National Guard, these people start running in, and they were telling us, get home, go home. So I remember driving on the highway, on the 10 to go back to Santa Monica. And it was like a free-for-all that day. It was like every man to themselves. When I got home and turned on the news, I was blown away by what was going on because I was right there in the middle of it and didn't know it.
While the city was being ravaged by riots and looting, the Clippers playoff series was put on hold.
Well, it took a while. I think we canceled a couple of days. We obviously couldn't play in the Clip joint. I think the Lakers are playing in Vegas.
It was decided Game 4 would take place at the Anaheim Convention Center, located 40 miles south of the city. But it would take a Herculean effort to prepare the space to host its first ever NBA game.
I was excited. Like, listen, I just wanted to get back to playing, and we were in the playoffs. And I thought it would be very good for the city to see their teams back at it and just try to get things back to normal.
With police and the National Guard in the streets, the Clippers' home court, baskets, and benches were literally relocated to Anaheim to try and create a home game atmosphere for their do-or-die matchup.
It was awesome. I thought our fans came to cheer. The energy they brought that day in Anaheim was unbelievable.
Blocked away by Charles Smith. No foul. Eaten up for it, but it's rebounded by Manning. Scored.
The noise was maddening. The energy from the players, from the fans, from the city. You could just feel like people were relieved to get back out and cheer for something, and we were ready to play.
Harper behind him. Harper left to right. He lays it up and in.
So we had this thing like we were not going to lose that game. Like you could just feel it.
All the way for layup. Good.
And Doc Rivers comes to life here in the last 2 minutes.
It was a great win for us. I remember all the energy that we had into the game, the celebration. I thought the fans were literally celebrating after that game.
In the end, the LA riots would inflict $1 billion of property damage and result in more than 50 people losing their lives. And although the Clippers would end up losing the final game of their series in Utah, they provided a wounded city with something priceless.
I think they were celebrating our victory, but more importantly, they were just celebrating that they could be back to normal. So a lot of good things that night for sure.
In times of uncertainty, we are united by sports. 40 years ago, when facing political and economic uncertainty, our nation rallied around a group of youngsters who exceeded all expectations. In February 1980, the eyes of the world were focused on Lake Placid, New York, a town nestled in the Adirondack Mountains, and the site of the 13th Winter Olympics. Prior to the start of the Games, tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States were running high in the wake of the Soviets' invasion of Afghanistan. Coupled with a sagging economy and a gas crisis at home, American morale was nearing an all-time low. Our nation needed something to believe in, and the upstart men's hockey team would play the starring role in the greatest underdog sports story of all time. Though the Olympic Games were originally founded as a tournament for amateurs, the Soviet Union's state-sponsored teams were made up of hockey players who were labeled soldiers or students, but were essentially paid to play hockey. The strategy had proven successful as the Soviets dominated world hockey, winning gold 4 consecutive times leading up to the 1980 Olympic Games. In contrast, the US team was the youngest in the entire tournament, was comprised mostly of college kids, and contained 0 professional hockey players. They were boys playing against men, and nobody, including the Russians, thought they could compete for a spot on the podium. But with the home crowd cheering them on, the American team made it to the medal round, where they would face the Soviets, a team that had steamrolled all of their previous opponents.
The excitement, the tension building. The Olympic Center filling to capacity.
On February 22nd, 1980, it seemed everyone around the country had their hopes pinned on the young Americans. Fans packed the Olympic Center ice arena for the highly anticipated matchup between the Cold War rivals. But the raucous chants of USA could not stop the Soviets from jumping out to a 3-2 lead heading into the final period.
Maltev in on the breakaway, and the Soviets move back on top 3-2.
With the weight of a nation on their shoulders, the US team answered the call.
They score!
Less than 2 minutes after Mark Johnson tied the match, team captain Mike Eruzione slapped in the go-ahead goal with 10 minutes remaining. The Americans would try to hold on to that lead until time expired.
11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Though the Americans would go on to defeat Finland to win the gold medal, it's the victory against our Cold War rivals, the mighty Soviets, that brought our country together during a turbulent time in our history. While most consider sports to be entertainment, its role in society has proven to be so much more. Working together and sacrificing for the team are lessons learned on the field of play, but put into action during the most critical moments of our lives. They say you don't know what you've got till it's gone, and this season has provided opportunities to reimagine what sports can be. Adapting to what life has thrown our way has allowed us to return to the court, to the ice, and to the field, just like we did in the past. But there is more work to do and more sacrifices to make before we can all safely return and celebrate together. While 2020 may be remembered as the most challenging of our lifetime, let's not forget the ways our society has banded together and been united by sports.